Hello everyone, welcome to Jolly Molly TV. Today is a big day. We are going to learn how to make the borders for our Pumpkins and Potions ladder quilt. And I'm adding a little twist to this video. I am actually going to show you how to create inner borders, which would be an additional border before what I call this outside border. I'm going to add a special little inside border to give it a little touch of something different. And it will make the quilt a little bit larger, so it may not fit on the ladders that you may be using to display this. Adding an additional little inner border gives it a very cute touch and will only add about 2 inches total to the width of the quilt. 1 inch on this side and of course 1 inch on this side. I just think that Kimberbell has this amazing 1-inch border that I think would be amazing to add to this quilt. So today's video, I'm going to show you how to do that inner border. Even if you might not be interested in making it, I suggest that you still watch the video because it'll give you a little bit of familiarity as to how we're going to make the larger border in the next video. And then you might change your mind once you see how cute it is and you might want to add it to your quilt. All right, so I hope you stay tuned. Let's go ahead and I'm going to go to the computer here and I want to show you how we're going to figure out what size borders we need to make. Okay, and we're now looking at the Kimberbell border instructions. This is a downloadable file that you will receive when you purchase the quilting designs, which are available at kimberbell.com. I will have a link in the description below as to where you can get these amazing quilting designs. Okay, so on the very first page of the instructions, they show you the quilting designs that come in this bundle. They're available and included in the pack from 1 inch wide to 6 inches wide, which I think is just incredible because you can use this for so many projects in the future. I love that they include all these various sizes. Okay, the inner border that I'm talking about adding is this one right over here, which is this amazing phrase. It'll say stitch and spell, happy hunting, trick or treat, just a bunch of hocus pocus. This is the additional inner border that I want to add to this quilt. And then the next video, we will tackle the outside border and all these amazing potion bottles, which I just love. I think having the saying on the inside of this border kind of makes it, in my mind, a continuation of this border. And I just think it's going to be so cool. I can't wait to see it. And I hope it comes out even better than I'm imagining it. So now we need to figure out what size designs we're going to be using for this quilt. And we're going to go to my table because I've written this out so we can kind of get an idea of what we're looking at. Okay, so this is the calculations that I did in order to figure out what I needed to make for the inside borders. So for the inside borders, I showed you the border is going to be 1 inch wide. We need to cut the fabric 1.5 inches wide to allow for shrinkage when the quilting is done on the fabric. All right. So this whole thing, we're going to be cutting strips of fabric that are 1.5 inches wide. You need to measure your quilt. Lay it out on a big table or on the floor or on the couch, and you need to measure from the center of your quilt down to the bottom center of your quilt. And mine is approximately 56 inches. I'm then going to allow an extra 2 inches, again, for that shrinkage. When it stitches out the design, it gently pulls the fabric ever so much. So I'm going to allow a 2-inch cushion for that shrinkage. So I'm going to be cutting my strips for the length of the quilt to be 58 inches long by 1.5 inches wide. And when we do that, if you know width of fabric, you'll be cutting by the width of fabric, but then you need to measure whether your fabric is 42 inches, 43 or 44, and then cut another strip to make up the difference to get to 58 inches. But then you have to sew them together. So you allow another 1/2 inch cushion for your seam allowance. Your seam allowance is only going to be 1/4 inch, but I just allow a 1/2 inch anyway. So after these two strips are sewn together, you want approximately 58 inches or a little bit bigger by 1.5 inches wide. And you want 2 of those. That's one for one side and one for the other side. That gives you what I call the lengthwise border, not the width. You want the lengthwise. 2 strips, 58 inches long total by 1.5 inches wide. Now we need to look at what size batting we need. Okay, we know the strips are 58 inches long by 1.5 inches wide, but in order to get to that 58 inches, we need to do 4 hoopings of 14 inches, which the math tells me then I need 8 pieces of batting that measure 1.5 inches wide by 14.5 inches long. Okay, and if you want to go ahead and cut your batting 2 inches wide or 1 3/4 inches wide, that's okay, because you're going to have a little bit more cushion as we trim around the excess of the batting to get it down, because again, our fabric is going to be 1.5 inches wide, but 1.5 inches should be perfect. And then of course we want it 14.5 inches long to give us a little room to make that trim. We need 8 of those. Then the last thing we also need is we need fusible. So we're going to be cutting fusible the same sizes as the fabric. Okay, my fusible comes 20 inches long, so I'll probably cut 20 inches and make it 1.5 inches wide, so it completely covers that strip, and do that in strips. All right, so that's just for the lengthwise border. And I'll go again in summary here in a second, just in case you are getting a little confused. But I'm trying to kind of walk you through how we do it, and then I'll give you a summary of exactly what you need. The top inner border, the widthwise, my quilt is approximately 16.5 inches without the borders. Then mind you, you're going to add an inch and a seam allowance. So I'm saying approximately 18.25 inches wide is what my top is going to be after I sew these 2 side borders on. So 18.5 inches. Then we're going to be using 2 design files. We're going to use a 7-inch and a 10-inch to get as close to this 18 or 18.25 inch as we can. So you're going to need batting that is 1.5 inches by 7 inches. You need 2 of those. And you need 2 batting. Let's make a circle around that. A circle around that. You're going to need 2 batting that is 1.5 by 11 inches. Then your fabric that goes across here, you're going to need 2 strips that are 20.5 inches long. Always go conservative, and if you need to go a little bit bigger, you can go to 21. That's okay, as long as you're not less than that. Okay? So, in summary, the easy way to look at this, keep that flat down here, is you're going to cut fabric for this inner border, 2 strips that are 1.5 inches wide by 20.5 inches long. That is your top and your bottom strip. You're going to cut 2 strips that are 1.5 inches wide by 58 inches long. Basically, you cut the width of fabric, and then you measure and cut the remaining strip to sew together, so the 2 strips will add up to at least 58 inches long, and sew them together straight across. Remeasure, make sure you've got at least 58 inches long. You need 2 of those. You're going to cut your fusible the same as the fabric. Then you need to cut batting. 2 strips that are 1.5 by 7 inches, 2 strips that are 1.5 by 11, and 8 strips that are 1.5 by 14 inches. So this is the prep work that you need to do in order to get ready to do the inside border. The outside border in the next video is actually going to be the exact same mathematical technique, except the numbers are going to be different because we've added this inner border, and then we're going to remeasure everything and do the math again for the outside border. So you can do a screen print of this so that you can have it on your phone in order to do this prep work, okay? I hope that makes sense. So this again is the Kimberbell instructions for the border. And since I know I'm going to be doing this 1-inch border, and I know the size of my quilt without borders on it, I can figure out what sizes that I need to use. Okay, so I'm looking at this 1-inch border over here. I know that my quilt is 56 inches, and then I added 2 inches as a cushion. So it's 58 inches. So then I'm going to say, all right, can I use the 14-inch long design? Yes, that's going to be basically 4 hoopings, and then I'll have just a tiny bit left over. And actually, if I go without the cushion that I've built in of 2 inches, 56 divided by 14 is 4 hoopings. So this is the file that I want to be able to use on my machine. Now, I have a Dream machine that will allow me to use a 9.5 by 14 inch hoop. Okay, so I can use this design with no problem on my machine. But what if you don't have that? What if you have a 5 by 7 hoop? Okay, you're going to have a little bit more hoopings to deal with, but you can still do this. So again, if I'm looking at 58 inches with my 2-inch cushion, and I'm going to divide it by 7, that's going to be 8 hoopings, but it can totally be done. Then I'll have a little bit of extra, which will just be a slight bit of fabric border on the top and the bottom. But remember, we built in a 2-inch cushion. So if I take that cushion out, which we still need a little bit of it, divided by 7, that is exactly 8 hoopings. So you're going to have just a little bit of fabric, but we need to allow that 2-inch cushion to allow for any of the shrinkage that's going to happen when we do the stitch out. So you can totally use your 5 by 7 inch hoop to do this. You just need to do 8 hoopings, which means your pieces of batting that are going to be cut instead of 14.5 inches long, you're going to make them 7.5 inches long. Again, always add that 1/2 inch so that you have something to tack down and then trim off so your batting isn't too short. Okay. You can also, if you have a 6 by 10 hoop, you can use the 10, do the same math. Okay. So if we did that and you have 58 and you're using the 10, you're going to have almost basically 6 hoopings. What might happen in this one, let's see if I did 56 divided by 10, I'm still going to be 5.6. You're going to have a little bit of a cutoff where this will be cut off as you combine it. So what I would do if you had a 6 by 10 hoop, I would go down and use a smaller size, because you don't want to have 5.6 hoopings or 5.8 hoopings and have to cut your phrase off. I would go down to the next smaller design and stitch that out so you have your phrase in its entirety and you don't have to chop off words or part of a word. You don't want to have to do that. Okay. All right. So that is what we're going to do for the lengthwise, for from top to bottom. Now we got to worry about the top of the quilt. The top of the quilt is approximately, with a cushion, 18.25 inches across. Well, I can't do a 14 because there's no 4, you know what I mean, to make it 18. So the closest combination I can do is 17. This one would, if I did a 7 and a 12, that would give me 19 inches. That's too much. you want to go less than your measurement. Mind you, my 18.5 inch has a 2-inch cushion. So I'm going to go to this one, which is going to be 7 and 10. And you're like, well, wait a minute. My measurement's 16.5. That's a 1/2 inch bigger without a cushion. I build in a cushion of 2 inches. I know for sure it's going to use up a 1/2 inch with no problem. But am I going to go over, because that's 17 inches? Let me show you another chart here. If we scroll down through the instructions, and we're going to go to this chart. This is the borders and sashing information chart. I can see here by the file design name 1x7, the embroidery field is actually only going to be 1.5 by 5.7. So this one is not going to come in at 7 inches. The file that's 1x10 is going to come in at 9.45. So I can very easily use this. It's going to come in a little bit over 15 inches. So again, like the top of the quilt, imagine it up here. We're going to have a little bit of blank fabric on each side, and the phrases are going to fit perfectly across the top. So when you're doing your measurements, your quilt should come in approximately the same if you've done the design the same as what Kimberbell has shown and placed your blocks in that same direction. Going across the top, these two are a perfect combination. So what we're going to end up doing is we can choose which one we want to stitch first. We can stitch this one, the 7 inch. This is Trick or Treat Yourself. Or you could stitch out Happy Hunting, Take at Your Own Risk. And you could put that one first. As we go across the quilt from left to right, you can pick any of those two in any order, and I'll show you that when we actually get to start stitching here in a few minutes. You can pick which one of those two, but you will need both of them to get across the top of that quilt. Does that make sense? I think that's enough of the technical babble. This chart is where I got my calculations for the size of the batting that we need and the design that we're going to need. Okay, so you always want to cut your batting about a 1/2 inch larger than what you're going to be needing. That's why when it's 1x14, we're actually going to cut the batting to 14.5. This is where I got that information. Okay, but follow my handwritten chart, and that hopefully will make this a little bit easier. Once you've got all the prep work cut, your fabric, your fusible, and your batting, then I want you to put and fuse the fusible to the back side of your fabric. That fusible is going to help strengthen your fabric so that it can withstand the stitches. Pay attention to the instructions on your fusible package as to how long you need to hold it down for, and put that fusible on the back, and then we're ready to start stitching.